Mergers are like forced marriages between two dysfunctional families, except everyone is wearing a $3,000 suit and lying about their assets. For the last 10 months, I haven't just been working. I've been the designated adult in a daycare center run by millionaires. My title is Corporate Integration Officer, which sounds fancy, but in reality, it means I'm the janitor for the C-suite's ego. I clean up the messes they make when they decide to combine two $400 million enterprises without checking if the IT systems speak the same language or if the HR departments are legally allowed to coexist. I work in silence. My office in Colorado is a glass box overlooking the Rockies, but I haven't looked at the mountains in 6 months. My view is a dual monitor setup glowing with Gantt charts, due diligence reports, and a master spreadsheet I call the Bible. It's color-coded: red for critical failure, yellow for incompetence, and green for the three things that are actually working. Most of the board is red. The company we were acquiring, a logistics giant called Vertex, was a mess of redundant contracts and hidden liabilities. My job was to smooth the edges so that when the final ink dried, we didn't accidentally inherit a lawsuit or a bankruptcy. I lived on caffeine and adrenaline. I knew the names of the security guards at Vertex better than their own CEO did. I knew which servers in the basement were overheating and which VP was expensing client dinners at a strip club in Denver. I knew where the bodies were buried because I was the one measuring the coffins. And then there was Roger. Roger was our VP of strategy. Roger was a man who used words like synergy and paradigm shift unironically while struggling to operate the office coffee machine. He was the kind of guy who failed upwards so hard he hit the ceiling and stuck there like a wet paper towel. He hated me. He hated me because I didn't nod when he spoke. I took notes. He hated me because when he proposed a timeline of 3 weeks for a system migration, I pulled up the data proving it would take 3 months. He hated me because I was the engine and he was just the hood ornament. The friction started on a Tuesday. I had just finished a 12-hour shift mapping out the personnel retention strategy. My eyes felt like they were filled with sand. I was closing my laptop when my phone buzzed. It was Mark, my fiancé. He's a structural engineer, quiet, solid, the kind of man who builds bridges that don't fall down. He'd sent a picture of a venue. A rustic barn in the foothills. Found a date that works, the text read. October 12th, I smiled. A genuine crack-in-the-armor smile. For a few seconds, I wasn't a corporate machine. I was a woman in love, planning a future that didn't involve indemnification clauses. I forwarded the email to my personal account to look at later. That was my mistake. In the corporate world, happiness is blood in the water. The next morning, the atmosphere in the war room, a glass-walled conference room that smelled perpetually of stale bagels and fear, was different. When I walked in, conversation stopped. It wasn't the respectful silence of people waiting for briefing. It was the predatory silence of a pack of hyenas spotting a limping gazelle. Roger was at the head of the table, leaning back in his Herman Miller chair like he'd personally invented sitting. "Jenna," he said, his voice dripping with that fake executive concern that usually precedes a stabbing. "Good of you to join us. We were just discussing priorities." I set my coffee down. "My priority is the Phase 4 operational merge, Roger. The legal team needs the asset list by noon." Right, Roger said, waving a hand dismissively. "The list. But are you sure you have the bandwidth? I heard through the grapevine that you've got some big personal projects ramping up." He gestured to the screen behind him. It wasn't the merger timeline. It was a screenshot of the venue Mark had sent me. Someone in IT monitoring, or maybe Linda in HR who I'd foolishly confided in about the engagement ring, had leaked it. "Nice barn," Roger smirked. "Looks like a lot of work." "Weddings are stressful, Jenna, distracting." I felt the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. My blood ran cold, but my face stayed blank. This is the part of the story where most people would scream or cry. I didn't. I've survived 3 hostile takeovers and a federal audit. I don't break for men like Roger. By the way, if you enjoy stories about competent women watching incompetent men dig their own graves, you might want to hit subscribe button and maybe drop a like. It really helps the algorithm know you're here for the carnage. But don't worry, I won't ask again. I'm too busy plotting. "Roger," I said, my voice steady, "I assure you my personal life does not impact my ability to deliver this merger. The asset list is done. It's in your inbox, is it?" He tapped a pen on the table. "Because I've noticed a lag in your response times on the weekend emails. And now this wedding planning on company servers, it paints a picture, Jenna. A picture of someone whose head isn't in the game." I looked around the room. The junior analysts looked at their shoes. The CEO, a man who feared conflict more than he feared bankruptcy, pretended to read a document. They were letting him do this. After 10 months of me carrying this deal on my back, saving them millions in discovered redundancies, they were letting this empty suit question my dedication because I dared to have a life outside of this building. "I haven't missed a deadline in 5 years, Roger," I said, keeping my voice low. "I suggest we focus on the acquisition agreement. The Buyer's Council is expecting the finalized Schedule M today." Roger's eyes narrowed. He didn't know what Schedule M was. I could see it in the slight twitch of his left eye. He had no idea that Schedule M was the list of key personnel legally required to remain with the company through the transition to ensure continuity. He didn't know that my name was at the very top of it. "We'll handle the schedule," Roger snapped. "You just focus on flowers or whatever. You need heads down focus this week, Jenna, real leadership." I sat down. I opened my laptop. I didn't say another word, but inside, the machine that ran my brain shifted gears. It went from integration mode to demolition mode. If they wanted to question my value, I was going to give them a demonstration of what happens when that value is removed from the equation. The air in the room was thick with the smell of cheap cologne and betrayal. I took a sip of my coffee. It was cold, perfect. The thing about corporate sabotage is that it rarely happens with a bang. It happens in the quiet clicks of a mouse, in the revocation of permissions, in the sudden inability to access a folder you built from scratch. By Wednesday, 2 days after Roger's little performance in the war room, I noticed the walls closing in. It started with the shared calendar. Suddenly, the strategic overview meetings, the ones where I usually dictated the agenda, were disappearing from my Outlook. When I asked the executive assistant, a terrified 22-year-old named Sarah, she wouldn't meet my eyes. "Roger said he wanted to keep the attendee list tight," she whispered, pretending to organize a stack of papers that were already perfectly aligned. "He said you were tapering off." "Tapering off," I repeated. The phrase tasted like ash, I see. I went back to my desk and tried to log into the Vertex employee database to verify the severance packages for the redundancy list. Access denied. A red box popped up, "Contact administrator." I didn't contact the administrator. I knew who the administrator answered to. Instead, I closed my door and lowered the blinds. If they wanted to play games with access, they were forgetting who designed the playground. I pulled an encrypted external hard drive from my purse. It was a matte black brick, heavy and cold. I plugged it into the back of my tower, bypassing the monitoring software Roger had likely asked IT to install on my main port. I began to archive. I didn't steal company property. I'm not a thief, I'm a professional. I saved copies of my work product. My methodologies, my original integration maps, my email correspondence proving that every delay in the last 6 months was due to Roger's inability to read a PDF, not my lack of focus. I saved every timestamped revision of the merger agreement. And then I went hunting for the smoking gun. The acquisition agreement was a 400-page monster of legalese. Most people, even the executives, only read the executive summary. They skimmed the financials and the payout structures. They ignored the exhibits. I opened the final draft of the contract, the version that had been sent to the buyer's legal team specifically for the signing ceremony scheduled for Monday. I scrolled past the indemnities, past the warranties, all the way down to the appendices. Schedule M, continuity of operations and key personnel. There it was. Clause 14.2, to ensure the stability of the transition phase, seller agrees that the named integration officer, as defined in Schedule M, shall remain employed and actively engaged in the integration duties for a period of no less than 90 days post-closing. Failure to retain the named integration officer constitutes a material breach of continuity, allowing the buyer to suspend or terminate the transaction. And right below it, in black and white, named integration officer, Jenna K. Caldwell. I stared at my name. It looked like a tombstone. Roger hadn't read this. The CEO hadn't read this. They assumed key personnel meant them, the C-suite, the visionaries, the guys who gave speeches. They didn't realize that the acquiring firm, a company known for its ruthless efficiency, didn't care about our CEO's speeches. They cared about the person who knew how to stop the servers from melting. They had insisted on this clause. I was the collateral for the loan. I printed the page. Just that single page. I folded it into a sharp square and tucked it into the inner pocket of my blazer, right next to my heart. It felt like carrying a live grenade. Later that afternoon, Roger stopped by my office. He was holding a stress ball, squeezing it rhythmically. "Squish, squish, Jenna," he said, leaning against my doorframe. "We've been thinking. With the wedding and everything, maybe it's best if we reassign the final data migration to Kevin." Kevin was an intern. Kevin once asked me how to spell Excel. "Kevin," I said flatly. "You want Kevin to migrate the sensitive HR data of 3,000 employees? It's a good learning opportunity," Roger said, flashing a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "And honestly, you look tired. We're just trying to help you. You seem overwhelmed." He was gaslighting me. He was taking my competence, my exhaustion from doing his job for him, and twisting it into a narrative of female hysteria. "She's emotional. She's planning a wedding. She can't handle the pressure." "I'm fine, Roger," I said. "But if you move the migration to Kevin, you'll corrupt the payroll files. The coding structures don't match." "We'll risk it," he said, pushing off the doorframe. "Just take a step back, okay? Focus on your dress fitting." He walked away, whistling. I watched him go. The rage wasn't hot anymore. It had frozen over into something sharp and clear. He wasn't just insulting me. He was dismantling the safety rails of a billion-dollar deal because his ego couldn't handle a woman knowing more than him. I turned back to my screen. The backup was complete. I ejected the drive and dropped it into my bag. Okay, Roger, I whispered to the empty room. You want me to step back? Watch how far I can step. I spent the rest of the day deleting my personal cheat sheets from the shared drive, the little how-to guides I'd written to help the team navigate the complex systems. If Kevin was going to run the migration, he was going to do it without my training wheels. I left the office at 5 p.m. on the dot. I never leave at 5 o'clock. Sarah, the assistant, looked up in shock as I walked past the front desk. Heading out early? She asked. Just focusing on my priorities. I said, have a good night, Sarah. I walked out into the cool Colorado air. The mountains were purple in the distance. I took a deep breath. It was the calm before the storm. I knew what was coming on Friday. I could feel it in the air like the static before a lightning strike. They were going to cut me loose, and they had no idea they were cutting the brake line on a speeding car. Friday at 4 p.m., the execution hour. In the corporate world, if HR calls a meeting for Friday afternoon, it's not for performance review. It's to ensure you can't make a scene because everyone else has already gone home. Linda from HR, the same Linda who had leaked my engagement news, appeared at my door. She wouldn't look at me. She stared fixedly at a point somewhere over my left shoulder. Jenna, she said, her voice tight. Roger and Mr. Henderson would like to see you in the conference room. Mr. Henderson was the CEO, the big guns. I stood up. I smoothed the front of my skirt. I picked up my phone and nothing else. Lead the way, Linda. The walk to the conference room felt like a funeral procession. The office was quiet. Most of the sales team had already left for client drinks. The lights buzzed overhead, a low-frequency hum that grated on my nerves. When I entered the room, Roger was there, along with the CEO. There was a manila folder on the table, a single, ominous object in the center of the mahogany expanse. Sit down, Jenna, the CEO said. He looked tired. He always looked tired, a man perpetually overwhelmed by the weight of his own imposter syndrome. I sat. I folded my hands on the table. I didn't lean back. I occupied my space. This is difficult, the CEO started. He was reading from a mental script. We've been reviewing the staffing needs for the post-merger entity. As you know, synergy creates redundancies. I am the integration officer, I said clearly. I am the one creating the synergies. How can I be redundant to the process I am building? Roger jumped in. He couldn't help himself. It's not just about the role, Jenna. It's about fit. We need someone who is fully present. We need 110%. And frankly, this week, the wedding planning on company time, the attitude, it's become a distraction to the team. A distraction, I repeated. I secured the IT bridge protocols yesterday. I saved us $200,000 in licensing fees on Tuesday. But my attitude is a distraction? It's a culture fit issue, Roger said, saying the magic words that allow companies to fire anyone for anything. We feel that your focus is elsewhere. Terminated for cause. Misuse of company resources. He slid the folder toward me, offering 2 weeks severance in exchange for a signed NDA and a waiver of claims. 2 weeks. For 10 months of blood, sweat, and missed holidays, for saving their asses daily. I looked at the CEO. Does the acquiring firm know about this? Have you consulted the transition agreement? Roger scoffed. We run this company, Jenna, not them, not yet. We handle our own personnel. He pulled a pen from his pocket and signed the termination notice on the bottom line. I watched his hand. It was trembling, just a tiny tremor in his index finger. He knew this was wrong. He knew it was dirty, but he was doing it anyway because his ego demanded a sacrifice. I didn't argue, I didn't yell, I didn't throw water in his face, I simply stood up. I won't be signing the waiver, I said softly, and I don't need the severance. Jenna, be reasonable, the CEO said, panic flickering in his eyes. If you don't sign, I'm terminated. I said, that means I'm no longer an employee, which means I no longer have to listen to you. I turned and walked to the door. Leave your badge and laptop at the front desk, Linda squeaked from the corner. I walked back to my office. I packed my personal items, a framed photo of Mark, a cactus that had survived 3 years of neglect, and my favorite mug. I left the laptop. I left the files. I left the chaos they were about to drown in. On my way out, I stopped by the legal department. The office was empty, but the internal review physical inbox was sitting on the paralegal's desk. It was where they put documents that needed to be filed for compliance audits. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a small silver thumb drive. It didn't contain stolen data. It contained a single PDF file. I had named it Urgent Compliance Review Schedule MPDF. I dropped it into the basket, made a soft clack sound. It was a message in a bottle. I knew the paralegals wouldn't check that basket until Monday morning, right before the signing ceremony. I walked to the elevator. I pressed the down button. As the doors closed, I saw Roger standing in the hallway watching me. He looked like he'd won. He had a smug, victorious grin on his face. Goodbye, Roger, I said as the doors slid shut. I rode the elevator down to the lobby, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I walked out of the building and into the parking lot. I sat in my car, gripped the steering wheel, and let out a long, shaky breath. I didn't cry. I picked up my phone and texted Mark, got fired. Dinner at the Italian place, I'm buying. Then I drove away. I was unemployed, but I wasn't finished. The machine was still running, but I had just removed the only gear that mattered. Now I just had to wait for the grinding sound. Saturday morning felt like waking up after a car crash. My body ached, not from impact, but from the sudden, violent deceleration of my life. For 5 years, my cortisol levels had been my alarm clock. Now the silence in the house was deafening. I sat at my kitchen island, drinking coffee from my own mug, not a styrofoam cup. Mark was making pancakes. He was humming. He didn't know the extent of it yet, he just knew I was out of a toxic environment. He thought it was a blessing. He didn't understand that for people like me, being useful is a drug, and I was going through withdrawal. "You want blueberries or chocolate chips?" he asked, flipping a batter circle with the precision of an engineer. "Both," I said. "I'm a rebel now." I kept my phone off. I knew what was happening on the other side of town. I could visualize it perfectly. Saturday is when the automated system checks run. It's when the data migration scripts I wrote usually execute. Without my authentication token, those scripts would fail. I imagined Kevin, the intern, staring at a screen filled with red error codes trying to call Roger. I imagined Roger ignoring the call because he was on the golf course, convinced that strategy meant ignoring the details until Monday. I spent the day gardening. I pulled weeds with a vicious intensity. Every dandelion was Roger. Snap, root and all. By Sunday, the silence from my phone, which I had turned back on, purely for observation, was suspicious. No panicked texts from former coworkers. That meant Roger had locked down the narrative. He had probably told the team I had a breakdown or that I quit to become a full-time bridezilla. He was scrubbing me from history, but you can't scrub a ghost. Around noon, I got a notification on LinkedIn. It wasn't a message, it was a profile view. "David Sterling viewed your profile." My heart skipped a beat. David Sterling was the general counsel for Vertex, the acquiring firm, the buyer. Why was the buyer's top lawyer looking at the profile of a terminated integration officer on a Sunday? I clicked on his profile. He was online. I didn't message him. That would look desperate. I needed them to come to the realization on their own. I needed them to walk into the bank vault and realize the money was gone. I went for a hike in the afternoon. The trail was steep, the air thin. I pushed myself until my lungs burned. I needed to feel something other than the cold calculation in my brain. At the summit, looking out over the sprawl of Denver, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't sad. I wasn't grieving the loss of the company. I was grieving the time I had wasted trying to save it. I had missed my niece's birthday for a board meeting. I had delayed my engagement party for a due diligence audit. I had given pieces of my soul to a corporation that treated me like a leasing option on a copier. "Never again," I said to the wind. When I got back to the car, there was another notification. This one was an email to my personal address. It was from a generic Gmail account, likely a burner. Subject, FYI body. Roger put Kevin in charge of the Monday presentation. He's using your old slides, but changed the author name to his own. Also, IT can't find the encryption keys for the HR database. Roger told them to hack it. Good luck, I smiled. It was Sarah, the assistant. The quiet ones always see everything. They were trying to hack their own database. They were going to trigger the intrusion countermeasures I had installed. If they forced entry without my key, the system would lock down to prevent a data breach. It was a safety feature designed to stop hackers. Now it was going to stop the CEO. I drove home with the windows down. The sun was setting, painting the sky in violent shades of orange and purple. Tomorrow was Monday, the signing ceremony. The press releases were written. The champagne was chilled. The photographers were booked. They were going to have a party to celebrate the merger, and I wasn't invited. But that was okay, because I was going to be the only thing anyone talked about. I went to bed early. I slept like a baby, the kind of deep, dreamless sleep that only comes to the righteous or the vengeful. I woke up at 6:00 a.m. Habit is a hard thing to break. I showered, did my hair, and put on full makeup, not because I was going anywhere, but because I needed the armor. I put on a silk blouse and tailored slacks. I sat at my home desk. It was time to light the fuse. I opened my personal email. I drafted a message to David Sterling, the general counsel at Vertex. I had his direct email from the due diligence phase. We had exchanged hundreds of messages about compliance. Subject, clarification regarding Schedule M compliance transaction, #8842. Dear Mr. Sterling, I hope this note finds you well. I am writing to formally update my contact information, as I am no longer employed by company name effective Friday, October 8th. Given the upcoming signing ceremony today, I wanted to ensure there was no confusion regarding the named Integration Officer designation under Schedule M, Clause 14.2 of the Acquisition Agreement. As I have been terminated, I assume a formal amendment has been filed to nominate a new officer. I would hate for my absence to cause any compliance friction during the continuity audit. Wishing you and the team a successful closing. Best regards, Jenna K. Caldwell. I read it over. It was perfect. It was helpful. It was polite. It was a knife to the throat disguised as a thank you note. I hit send. 8:15 a.m. The signing was scheduled for 10:00 a.m. I poured a second cup of coffee and waited. At 8:22 a.m. my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. At 8:24 a.m., it rang again. Same number, voicemail. At 8:25 a.m., a text message arrived. Jenna, it's David Sterling. Please call me immediately. I waited 5 minutes, then I replied via email. Mr. Sterling, I am currently stepping into an appointment. Is there an issue? I wasn't stepping into an appointment. I was stepping into my living room to water my plants, but he didn't need to know that. Meanwhile, at the office, the chaos was beginning. I knew this because Sarah was texting me updates from the bathroom. Sarah, 8:30 a.m. Roger is screaming at it. The HR database is fully locked. It says unauthorized access attempt lockdown mode. Sarah, 8:45 a.m. The Vertex team just arrived. They look serious. Their lawyer is on his phone in the lobby. He looks pissed. Sarah, 9:00 a.m. Roger just asked me if I knew your password. I told him you never wrote it down. He threw a stapler. I sipped my coffee. The image of Roger throwing a stapler was delicious. He was unraveling. The visionary was realizing that vision doesn't unlock encrypted servers. At 9:15 a.m., David Sterling emailed me back. Jenna, there is no amendment filed. You are listed as the sole guarantor of operational continuity. If you are not employed, the deal is in breach. Are you confirming you have been terminated for cause? I replied, terminated for misuse of company resources, wedding planning. No misconduct regarding company operations. I offered to consult but was escorted out. That was the kill shot, wedding planning. I made it sound exactly as petty as it was. Sterling was a serious man. He didn't care about weddings. He cared that a multi-million-dollar asset was being managed by people who fired their chief engineer over a Pinterest board. Sarah, 9:30 a.m. The lawyers are going into the boardroom. The CEO looks like he's going to throw up. Roger is sweating through his shirt. I checked the time. 30 minutes to the signing. The cameras would be setting up. The press would be waiting. I stood up. I walked to my closet and pulled out my boardroom jacket, a sharp, white blazer that looked like it meant business. I wasn't going to the office. Not yet. I was going to let them sit in the pressure cooker a little longer. I needed them to be desperate. I needed them to realize that without me, they weren't buying a company, they were buying a burning building. I sat back down and opened a book. I read the same paragraph 4 times without absorbing a word. My heart was racing, but my hands were steady. This was it. Machine was grinding to a halt. The boardroom at the office is designed to intimidate. It has a table made of reclaimed mahogany that cost more than my first car, and floor-ceiling windows that offer a panoramic view of the city our CEO pretended to own. Today, it was set for a coronation. According to Sarah's texts, the room was packed. On one side, our team, the CEO, pale, shaking hands, Roger, red-faced, frantically whispering to the IT director in the corner, and the CFO staring at his phone, probably checking if his golden parachute had deployed. On the other side, the Vertex team, David Sterling, the general counsel, their CEO, a woman named Catherine, focused on efficiency above all else, and their bankers. The table was lined with bottles of Fiji water and crystal glasses. A photographer was testing the lighting in the corner. Flash, flash, it was a performance. A theater piece titled Everything is Fine, but everything was not fine. At 9:45 a.m., Roger walked over to the Vertex team. He was trying to be charming. I could practically hear his voice, that oily, confident baritone he used to bullshit investors. Just a few minor technical hiccups with the data migration, he likely said. Nothing to worry about, we have our best people on it. He meant Kevin. Kevin was currently in the server room, likely crying. David Sterling didn't smile. He checked his watch. He looked at his phone. He looked at the email I had sent him. Sarah, 9:50 a.m. The Vertex lawyer just closed his laptop. He's whispering to their CEO. She's looking at Roger like he's a bug. I could feel the tension radiating through the cellular network. The air in that room must have been vacuum sealed. At 9:55 a.m., my phone rang again. It was the CEO this time. I stared at the screen. Mr. Henderson? I let it ring. He called again immediately. I let it ring. He left a voicemail. I played it on speaker. Jenna, it's John. We need to clear up a misunderstanding. Are you available to hop on a call? We're about to sign and there's a paperwork issue. A paperwork issue, that's what he called me. I was a paperwork issue. I didn't call back. 10:00 a.m., the signing hour. I imagined the scene. The CEO standing up, buttoning his jacket, forcing a smile for the cameras. He would reach for the contract. Sarah, 10:02 a.m., they stopped. The Vertex lawyer just put his hand over the contract. He's talking loud. I closed my eyes and visualized it. Sterling, with his iron gray hair and rimless glasses, placing a manicured hand over the document. The silence in the room, the camera shutter stopping. The sudden realization that the script had been burned. I believe Sterling would say, his voice cutting through the bullshit, that we have a compliance problem. I grabbed my keys. It was a 20-minute drive to the office. If I timed it right, I would walk in just as the walls were crumbling. I checked my reflection in the hallway mirror. I didn't look like a victim. I didn't look like a distracted bride. I looked like the person who held the keys to the kingdom. I walked out to my car. The engine roared to life. Okay, boys, I said. Let's see how much you really miss me. I drove fast. Traffic on I-25 was light. I drove with the radio off. I needed focus. I was rehearsing my lines, not that I needed many. Silence is often louder than screaming. I pulled into the guest parking lot. I didn't park in my old spot. I wasn't an employee. I was a visitor, a very hostile visitor. The security guard, an older man named Earl, looked confused when he saw me. I had turned in my badge on Friday. Jenna, I thought you were gone. I am, Earl, I smiled. Just here to pick up something they forgot. He buzzed me in. The system still recognized my face, or maybe he just didn't have the heart to stop me. The elevator ride up to the 20th floor took 45 seconds. In those seconds, I centered myself. I locked away the anger, the hurt, the humiliation of Friday afternoon. I became pure function. I was the algorithm. When the doors opened, the lobby was silent. The receptionist was gone, likely hiding. But I could hear voices coming from the boardroom down the hall, not the polite murmurs of a business deal, shouting. I walked down the hallway. My heels clicked on the marble floor. Click, 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 the sound of a countdown. I stopped outside the heavy glass doors of the boardroom. The blinds were drawn, but the voices carried. You cannot be serious. That was Roger. His voice cracked. She's one employee. We have the data. We have the systems. You have a locked database and a breach of contract. That was Sterling. His voice was cold, precise steel. Schedule M is explicit, named integration officer. You fired her 3 days before closing? Are you insane? She was distracted. Roger yelled. She was planning a wedding. I don't care if she was planning an invasion of Poland. Sterling roared back. She's the only person who knows how to merge these distinct legacy systems without corrupting the historical data. We did our due diligence, Roger. Your IT infrastructure is a house of cards held together by her code. You pulled the glue out, we can rehire her. The CEO's voice was pleading now. We'll call her back, it's just a misunderstanding. You already tried calling her, Sterling said. She's not answering. And frankly, if I were her, I wouldn't answer either. You've compromised the asset. We are suspending the signing. You can't suspend. Roger sounded desperate. The press is outside. The stock price is going to zero if you acquire a company you can't operate, Catherine, the Vertex CEO, spoke up. Her voice was quiet but terrifying. We are walking away unless you can produce the officer in compliance within the hour. We can't produce her. Roger screamed. She's gone. That was my cue. I didn't knock. Didn't wait to be announced. I pushed the double doors open. They swung wide with a heavy whoosh. The room went dead silent. 20 heads turned. Roger looked like he'd seen a ghost. The CEO looked like he'd seen a savior. Sterling looked like he'd seen a professional. I stood in the doorway, framed by the light from the hallway. I held my purse in one hand and my sunglasses in the other. I believe I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel, you were looking for me. Roger's mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. No sound came out. I walked into the room. I didn't look at Roger. I didn't look at the CEO. I walked straight to David Sterling. Mr. Sterling, I said, extending my hand. Jenna Caldwell, apologies for the confusion. As you know, my calendar cleared up unexpectedly on Friday. Sterling took my hand. A small, barely perceptible smile touched the corner of his mouth. He knew exactly what I was doing. He loved it. Miss Caldwell, he said, good of you to join us. We were just discussing the continuity of operations. I turned to face the room. The CEO was sweating so profusely I thought he might melt into the carpet. I'm happy to discuss continuity, I said. But first, we need to discuss the terms of my consulting engagement. Since technically I don't work here anymore. The air in the room was electric. The CEO, Mr. Henderson, stumbled forward. Jenna, thank God, look, we've been talking and clearly there was a breakdown in communication on Friday. We want you back, full reinstatement, same salary. I looked at him. I let the silence stretch for 5 seconds, 10 seconds. It was agonizing for him. John, I said, using his first name. It was a power move. I had always called him Mr. Henderson. I was terminated for cause, misuse of resources. That's on my permanent record. You can't just hit undo, we'll expunge it, he said quickly. Wiped clean like it never happened. But it did happen, I said, and now I'm a private contractor, and my rate has changed. Roger found his voice. This is extortion, he hissed. You planned this. You locked the database. I turned to him slowly. The database locked itself, Roger. It's an intrusion countermeasure. It triggers when an unauthorized admin like, say, Kevin, tries to force a migration script without the proper encryption keys. Keys that are in my head. I didn't lock you out. Your own incompetence did. Sterling chuckled dryly. She's right. We use the same protocol. I turned back to the Vertex team. If I step back in, I can have the systems bridged and the data migrated by Friday. The database will be unlocked in 10 minutes. The deal can proceed. And if you don't, Catherine, the Vertex CEO asked, who was watching me with interest. If I don't, I shrugged, you'll have to rebuild the integration architecture from scratch. It will take 6 months and cost roughly $3 million in contractor fees, plus the risk of data loss. Catherine nodded. She looked at Henderson. Fix this now or we walk. Henderson looked at Roger. Roger looked at the floor. What do you want, Jenna? Henderson asked. His voice was defeated. 1, I said, holding up a finger. Immediate reinstatement. Not as integration officer, as VP of strategic integration. Roger's head snapped up. That was his level. 2, I continued. A 20% raise. Retroactive to the start of the merger. Done, Henderson said. He didn't even blink. 3, I said. A formal written apology for the wrongful termination, signed by both you and Roger, to be placed in my file. I'm not signing that, Roger spat. Then I'm leaving, I said. I turned on my heel. Roger. Henderson screamed. It was the first time I'd ever heard him raise his voice. Sign the damn paper. Roger turned purple. He grabbed a notepad. He scribbled something furiously. And 4, I said, stopping at the door. Roger is removed from the Integration Oversight Committee. I report directly to Catherine and the Vertex board. This was the coup de grace. I was cutting him out of the loop. I was taking his toy away. The room went quiet. Henderson looked at Roger. Roger looked like he was about to have a stroke. Agreed, Catherine said from the other side of the table. We prefer a direct line to the competent personnel anyway. Henderson nodded weakly. Agreed. I walked back to the table. I set my purse down. Excellent, I said. Now, if someone could please pass me the contract, I believe Schedule M needs to be initialed. Sterling slid the document toward me. He handed me his own pen, a Montblanc. I signed my name. Jenna K. Caldwell. Now, I said, clapping my hands together. Let's get those servers unlocked. Roger, you might want to tell Kevin to stop typing before he accidentally deletes the payroll. Roger sank into his chair. He was smaller now, deflated. I looked at the camera in the corner. The photographer, sensing the shift, snapped a picture. Flash, I smiled. It was the best wedding photo I would ever take. By 2:00 p.m., the champagne was flowing. The deal was signed. The stock market reacted favorably. The press release went out, hailing the seamless transition and the visionary leadership of the combined teams. I wasn't at the party in the lobby. I was in the server room. It took me 5 minutes to unlock the database. I entered the encryption key, a string of characters that was, ironically, the date of my engagement backwards. The red lights turned green. The fans whirred to a lower, happier hum. Kevin was sitting in the corner, holding a cold compress to his head. I thought I broke it, he whimpered. You didn't break it, Kevin, I said gently. You just tried to drive a Ferrari with the keys to a tricycle. Go get a drink. He scurried away. I walked back to my office. My nameplate was still in the trash can where Linda had thrown it. I picked it up. I put it back on the door. My phone buzzed. It was Mark. How's the unemployment life? Lunch? I texted back. Actually, I got a promotion and a raise. You can upgrade the bar package for the wedding. There was a knock on my door. It was David Sterling. He was holding 2 glasses of champagne. I figured you wouldn't want to toast with Roger, he said, stepping inside. You figured right, I said. He handed me a glass. That was a hell of a poker game, Miss Caldwell. You knew we wouldn't sign without you. I knew you read the contracts, David, I said, unlike some people. Roger is being moved, he said quietly. Special projects, which is code for a desk in the basement until his contract expires. You report to me now. I clinked my glass against his. I look forward to it. One question, he asked, leaning against my desk. The wedding. Is it actually going to be a distraction? I laughed, a real laugh. David, I just dismantled a hostile executive team, negotiated a 20% raise, and rebooted a global database, all before lunch. I think I can handle picking out table linens. He smiled. I think you can. Welcome to Vertex. He left. I sat in my chair. I spun around to look at the mountains. The sun was shining. The machine was humming. I was back in the driver's seat. I opened the Bible, my master spreadsheet. I changed Roger's status from active to obsolete. The cell turned gray. It was the most beautiful color I'd ever seen. I took a sip of champagne. It tasted like victory. I pulled up the Pinterest board for the wedding. I added a new pin, a white blazer. The caption read, Armor. Most people think corporate life is about synergy and bottom lines. It's not. It's about leverage. It's about knowing exactly what you are worth and burning the building down if they try to pay you a penny less. I turned back to my screens. Now I whispered, let's get to work. The phone rang. It was Sarah. Jenna, Roger is asking how to access the new org chart. Tell him to submit a ticket, I said. Processing time is 6 to 8 weeks. I hung up. I am Jenna K. Caldwell, VP of Strategic Integration, and I am dangerously efficient.